Hi everyone, welcome to week 10 of our SHSAT program. So this week's grammar topic is going to be subject-verb agreement. So basically what that means, and to break it down, in a sentence, you always have in every, independent clause, you have a subject, which is essentially the thing, like the person or whatever that's doing the action, and the verb, which is the action that the subject does. So you always need to make sure the subject and the verb agree. They have to agree in tense. They have to agree in, so basically by tense, I mean like it should, if the sentence is in the past, it should continue to be in the past. They have to agree in number. So if it's a singular verb, if it's a singular subject, the verb has to be conjugated in the singular case. So what that means is, if you have the dog barks, okay, that works because the dog is one dog and barks is a singular conjugation of the verb to bark. The dogs bark also works because bark is the plural version of the word bark, and then dogs are plural. You can't say the dogs barks because the dogs is a plural subject and barks is a singular verb. So that's disagreement between the subject and the verb. Similarly, you can't say something like the dog bark because the dog is singular, bark is a plural verb. So yeah, we're just gonna go and run through some example problems. So, the players, as well as the captain, want to win. Okay, so what's important about questions like this is you essentially have to ignore everything between the subject and the verb. So, ignore everything other than the subject and the verb. So, what's our subject here? What is doing the wanting, which is what the verb is? Well, it's the players. It says, as well as the captain. That's a modification to the subject, which is the players. Okay, and we know that the players is a plural, subject, because there's multiple players. The players is a plural word. So even though the captain is singular, we can sort of ignore that, and we have to pick the plural version of the verb want, which is want. So it's the players as well as the captain want to win. It's not the players as well as the captain wants to win. What I'll say is most of the time, since if English is your native language, it's going to sound more natural to you if it's correct as opposed to if it's incorrect. Like there's just something wrong about saying the players as well as the captain wants to win. It doesn't sound right. So usually, you can go with your gut, but we're just teaching you like the proper grammatical explanation for why certain things are correct and some things are incorrect. So we're going to know another. There was or were 15 candies in that bag. Now there is or are only one left. Okay, so there was or there were 15 candies in that bag. Okay, well, what's the subject of this sentence? It's not the bag. The bag is, the location of where the sentence is happening. But, the bag is not doing anything in the sentence. The subject is actually the 15 candies. And although they're not really doing anything, we say that, their action is being. Was and were are conjugations of the verb to be. So that's what the candies are doing. Okay. And now we look. There's obviously multiple candies. Even if it doesn't say 15, we know candies is a plural verb. A plural subject. But it literally says there are 15 candies, which is obviously more than one. So we need to pick the plural version of the verb to be. So it would be were. So there were 15 candies in that bag. Okay, then what happened next? Now there is or there are only one left. Okay, so now the subject is one candy. It doesn't say candy explicitly, but this one is the subject of the sentence. And again, the verb it's doing is being. So is and are both conjugations of the verb to be. So we need to look for the singular because look, there were 15, now there's only one. Well, one is obviously singular because it's the only one. So now we need to look for the singular conjugation, which is. So there were 15 candies in that bag, now there is only one left. Again, it sounds wrong to say there was 15 candies in that bag. That's grammatically incorrect. And now there are only one left. Again, that's not right. So the answers were and then is. Now we're going to look at some more. Okay, so Annie and her brothers are or is at school. Okay. So here, it's a little trickier, right? Because Annie is singular, but the brothers is plural. But what you need to know is when it says and, it's sort of just adding on to the subject. So the subject of this sentence, it's not like the one with the players and the captain. The subject is Annie and her brothers because they are all at school. They're all being at school. Okay, and obviously Annie and her brothers, that's a bunch of people, so the answer would be are, because it's a plural subject, so we need the plural version of the verb to be, which is are. Okay. The movie, including all the previews, takes about 2 hours to watch. Okay, so again, this is sort of similar to the very first problem we did with the players and their captain. So even though it includes all the previews, which are plural, the subject is just the movie. Because you can see that including all the previews is sort of separated from the subject by commas. It's a dependent clause, but it's a separate clause from the movies. So it's not part of the subject. The subject is the movie by itself, which is singular. So now we need to find the singular verb. Is it take or takes? Well, takes is the singular verb. Okay, so we're going to look at one more example, and this is sort of a two-parter. So, the committee debates or debate these questions carefully. So this one's tricky. We can see clearly that the subject is the committee, and the thing they're doing is they're debating, but we don't know if it should be plural or singular. And although it makes sense, right, to put debate here, because that's a plural verb, and the committee has multiple people, it's a collection of people. But actually, we need to put debates, because the committee is singular. Although the committee consists of a lot of people, it's one thing, it's one committee. Similarly, like if you had like the family, that's a singular verb, that's a singular noun. Even though it's a collection of people, it's describing them as one whole unit by themselves. So we count it as a singular word. So the committee debates, not debate, because debate is the singular verb and debate is a plural verb. But here, right, the committee members lead very different lives in private. This is sort of a continuation of our talking about the committee. But here, it's not actually going to be leads, because the committee members is now no longer describing the committee as one whole unit of people. It's describing the people separately. And there is implied to be multiple members of this committee, so it should be plural, right? It says committee members, not like this committee member or this committee leads a very different life in private. So the answer for this one is going to be lead. So yeah, that's about it for subject-verb agreement. It's sort of a faster topic, and it's easier because it just sounds natural to native English speakers, which one to use. The wrong option is just going to sound wrong in your head to say. But yeah, as always, if you have any questions about anything relating to this or anything else, leave them in the comments, and otherwise we'll see you guys next week.